Hi, we are going to cut out the trouser, and so after all of the pattern assembly takes place, you have your pattern ready to go. I have the Palazzo pant here. I have layout. It has to do with the width of the fabric. There's different ways to lay things out, and so I will put the diagrams from the pattern in a PowerPoint and put it underneath the module for this coming week, module 8. All right, so that'll give you directions if your fabric's 42 to 45 inches wide. I also have some fabric that's 42 to 45 inches wide, so I will lay it out again and take pictures. Fabric that I have is linen from Mood, and it is 58 inches wide. So that allows me to cut the Palazzo pant in less than 2 yards of fabric. But if you have narrow fabric, then you're probably going to need 3 yards. So look at the yardage guide on the PowerPoint presentation from the pattern. All right, so what I've got here, and now you can come closer with the camera and I'm going to point to things. So you can see that I have my back pant, and I cut the 18, so it's you know, pretty large, and there it is laid out. But because the fabric is wide enough, if I wasn't sure if I could be able to get it on 2 yards, but I could easily, and actually have a little. But you can see this is the front. I folded the pattern on the grain line, which then allowed me to see the crease and draw a grain line, and that then allows me to nest. I was trying to think of the word. Nest these patterns a little bit, and you can see that saves me a good like 10 inches of fabric right there, because I can nest those in. Then I have all this room over here for the waistband, and I have all this room for extra pieces, and I actually have a little extra fabric left over in my 2 yards. Is lined up perfectly, and pressed it and made sure that the selvage was lined up. All right, that then gives me a nice fold. All right, now remember the fold runs on the grain, parallel to the grain, and so does the selvage. So now I can measure from the fold or the selvage. So I measured from the fold, and there's no magic number. This just happens to be 8 1/4. And then I go down and I make sure that this is 8 1/4. And then I go down and make sure this is 8 1/4. And then I know I'm on grain, and I pin it. All right, so now I can measure over here from the selvage. All right, and that is, let's see, 9 3/8. Now I'll go down here, and it's only 9. So there's 9 3/8, and there's 9 3/8. Okay, so now I know it's on grain, and I'm just, nested in there. Nothing's crossing over. And pins, you need to place a pin about the width of your hand away from each other, and you can also put a pin on the grain line if that helps hold it in place for you. You can always, start by putting a pin there on the grain line, and then very well. All right, and then you want to make sure that your shield is now your shield says cut 1. I always cut 2 anyways, because my fabric's already doubled. That way it gives me 1 to practice, because remember, you are going to do a sample, so you can use this extra fabric to do your sample if you like. Just making sure that everything was on grain. And because these edges are following the grain line, you can also look at the grain of the fabric to make sure that it's on grain. So here we've got the pocket facing, the yoke, the shield, and the fly facing. All right, and that is everything. And then you will cut it out. And I don't think, one other thing, if you can come over here closer, David. So can you see where I've traced this pattern? So that's the back waistband. The back waistband is cut 4, so you'll have to place it trace it, place it again, pin it, and then these are each cut too. So this is your left front and your right front. You want to make sure that they're on grain and the front of the waistband is on the grain. And that fit here very easily, and I had plenty of fabric with my 2 yards. Then make sure to snip those notches. Remember, you guys are, and all I'm gonna do is demonstrate cutting the notches again. So in the last video, I went around and I showed you where all the notches would be placed, and you can see I used a notcher to cut them. I just wanted to go over. Now remember, we are working with a commercial pattern, so even though we assembled it, it was a butterick pattern, I believe. It's either McCall's or butterick, I don't remember. No, maybe it was Simplicity. Anyways, so you can see that I have cut all my, so you're just gonna go in and just make a little snip about 1/4 of an inch deep. We have 5/8 inch seam allowance, so if you snip 1/4 of an inch, you will be able to see that notch later on, and yet you won't dip too far into your seam allowance. Now I'm cutting the front rise of the linen pant right now, and I wanted to just reiterate how important these notches are. This is the most critical notch on your entire pant. That's where you're doing the fly front. That's a really important notch. So anyways, you can see. So here I have my lining, my pocket lining laid out, and I actually had some of this iridescent lining left over, and it's kind of a nude or apricot color, so I know it might be, you know, I just like the contrast with the linen, and since it's sort of nude, it should be okay. Like, you would not want to use a black lining with yellow linen because it would show through and look very ugly. Typically you would use a white lining. I don't have any white lining, but I think because this is nude, it'll kind of look like my skin tone. And I like the, you know, I just like the combination of it. So anyways, I'm using this for my lining. Now you can see that often the way they put, you know, a pattern, if you flip it over and you trace the grain line, then you can what's called nest patterns and more efficiently. So like I said, I had some lining left over, and you can fit your pocket lining. You cut 2 of the back pocket lining, 2 of the front pocket lining. They don't call it front and back, but that's really what it is. They call it, like, this is the yoke, and this, you can see this edge is where the lining goes along the 1/4 top pocket. But anyways, this is the way it looks when you cut it out, and you can fit it in about about less than a half a yard, a little bit less than a half a yard.